Hello, I'm Robert, volunteer fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And this time it's about the second video in the series for this blog post, and it's about why are the 7 leaders from Europe there to support Zelensky. And this is clearly because of the security guarantees. So Witkoff, if he got it right, he says that Putin has agreed that Ukraine needs security guarantees. This is true. This is very encouraging because it means that Putin does not intend to invade Ukraine again after the ceasefire, because he knows very well that if that the United States, United Kingdom, France, etc. provide security guarantees, then he can't invade again once the ceasefire starts. So this is extremely promising if it's true. And I talked in the previous video about how, first of all, Zelensky will have to do a counter-proposal, and then Putin will have to respond to that, because it's clear that Putin's first proposal is not going to work. And then hopefully at some point they do find a mutually agreed proposal. If that is true, then this is where the security guarantees come in. So now, in this video I just want to explain why these security guarantees are so needed, and then a little bit about how the security guarantees will work, the process of a ceasefire. I won't talk any more about the peace treaty. I could maybe do that as a third thing. This is just about the security guarantees and the ceasefire itself. So if you remember during the Oval Office meeting, then what went wrong there, in a nutshell, is that Trump asked Zelensky to trust Putin. And Zelensky said that he couldn't trust Putin and that he needed security guarantees. Well, now Trump has come to understand that Putin is not trustworthy after Putin has broken promises to Trump many times. It seems to require personal experience. He's very convincing that he seems very sincere. And even when other people have experienced that, but you yourself haven't, then when you're with him in person, then you can seem very sincere, apparently, but he isn't. So this is, you need to understand Europe's perspective here, to understand why Europe has such a strong emphasis that it has to ensure that Ukraine has security guarantees, and it doesn't just rely on a promise. So this is about the invasion, the day of the invasion, and you look at Macron's face, and if you're good at reading emotions on his face, you can see how devastated he was. So the background here, why was he so devastated on the day of the invasion? Well, Macron had got sincere seeming promises from Putin that he was sincerely interested in peace, that he was working towards a peace deal. He had agreed on the actual day of the invasion. On that day, Macron was expecting Lavrov and Blinken to meet to arrange for Putin and Biden to have an in-person meeting somewhere. And instead of getting the phone call that this meeting is going ahead and it's going well and so on, he got a surprise phone call from Zelensky saying Russia's invaded Ukraine, and it's invaded in all directions. So that's the context here. So you can understand his face when he really sincerely believed that Putin was interested in peace. So now if you look at the transcript, I think this is really, there's so many people tell me, look, Zelensky is the warmonger, they tell me. They tell me that Zelensky started this war, and that Russia is the victim, and that Zelensky is not interested in peace. All of those are so far from the truth. And just listen to this video and read it. And so I'll just summarize the basic things. And I was watching at the time, following the events. We followed the events much more closely in the UK than you do in the United States. And we followed every day. We had reporters in Kiev reporting what was happening there. And it filled our news kind of 24/7 during the invasion. So we're very familiar with what happened, those of us who remember, who were watching it and remember. So this is the actual live recording taken within Macron's office when he received the call from Zelensky. So Zelensky, he opens up, it's very terrible what they do. So they're in some cities, the centres of some regions, they have airplanes already there. Now they're in Kiev, we're fighting in Kiev. So on the very first day of the war, their soldiers, so they never expected Russia to actually attack Kiev. It was most extraordinary. There were actual Russian special forces in the streets of Kiev attacking them. And in Odessa. And there were airplanes and helicopters, as he explains, flying over, dropping bombs and things. They don't go into all the detail there, but I remember from following it closely at the time. So they had an invasion by tanks coming from Belarus, from the north, towards Kiev. They had an invasion of tanks, and they went through the nature park where the Zaporizhia nuclear reactor was. Not the Zaporizhia, the Chernobyl nuclear reactor, the one that had to be shut down. And the tanks came down that way. Then they had from the east, the tanks just drove over the border into Kharkiv. They killed the patrol, the man who was standing in patrol. The tanks just drove up to the patrol post and killed him and drove through. And then from the south, the ships landed on the shores of near Mariupol, and they tried to also land on the shores near Odessa. And so there were ships invading from the south, and then there were planes flying over everywhere, and there were special forces in these cities going around killing people. And all that happened just very suddenly. It was extremely shocking back then, because back then there hadn't been any war in Europe, not a serious war like this, for a long time. And then suddenly, without any warning, thousands of civilians were being killed on that first day. So, Macron, do you have any idea how many civilians were killed already? Zelensky, no, thousands. And are you insecure yourself? I think so. I think nobody's in a safe situation now in Kiev, because we are in the circle of the Russian army coming from the north, from the east and the south. And he complained that the special forces were everywhere. And Macron then says, and you can see his, if you watch the video, you can see his face as he says that, it's clear, it's total war. I think that might have been the point at which he says to Zelensky, it's clear, it's total war, the expression that you see on his face there. And so then Zelensky, his first thought is to say, so I think, Emmanuel, it's very important that you speak with Putin, and very important to make an anti-war coalition. And he says that Ukrainians are sure that European leaders and Biden can call Putin and say stop, and he will stop, and he will listen to Europe. And what I want to say is just stop the war and speak with him. And Macron said, but will he will ask, where are you ready to go? Are you ready to sit down at the table and start negotiating? And Zelensky said, of course, okay, we have to, of course we have to. So Zelensky immediately, he wanted to stop the war right away and talk to Putin and find out what it's all about and why he's invaded and what they can negotiate about. And so Macron said, okay, he'll do what he could. And then they say, they say take care of both and thank you and so on. And so that's on the day of the invasion. Of course, Putin didn't agree to talk to Zelensky, and he just kept on invading, and he didn't agree to talk to anyone. In terms of, and it was only much later when he was defeated in the Battle of Kiev that they started to consider peace negotiations in Istanbul, which didn't work. But that's how the war started. It was not started by Zelensky. Please don't believe anyone who tells you that Zelensky started this war. It was started by Putin. And Putin started this war by breaking a promise to Macron. And that is why Zelensky and Europe are they see it's so important that they have robust security guarantees that ensure that Putin can't invade again. Because if he just promises and he says, look, I'll do a ceasefire, but I promise I won't invade again, pinky swear, I won't invade again, and then they know that probably just a week or two later he'll be invading again. So the only way to do it is to make sure he can't invade. So this is where what Witkoff said is so important. It seems that Putin has agreed to robust security guarantees, it appears that the financial levers that Trump is pulling now about the oil sales must be extremely potent levers to get Putin to agree to that, because he knows that if he agrees to that, then he can never invade again, and he's got all of Ukraine he's ever going to get. So that is why all these partners are there. So some of them are a little bit surprising, but most of them are very obvious. They are the very clear security partners that would be able to provide these security guarantees. So that's why they're there. And so I just want to then talk very briefly about the ceasefire process, and then I'll end this video. So the way a typical ceasefire works is that, first of all, you establish a border, buffer region between the two armies. And it's typically 5 kilometers. It can be different size. It might be more in a model more. They just have to decide what is a suitable buffer region. And so whatever size it is, then the soldiers both sides have to withdraw by half the width of the buffer region from the contact line. And none of the armed forces on either side are permitted to go into the buffer region ever. So that is the first thing that happens in the first few days of the ceasefire. And then they stop firing missiles at each other, and there are always going to be ceasefire violations, that some nervous soldier or someone didn't quite get the message or whatever, and they're so used to fighting, and they fire a missile, they fire a weapon. But over a period of several days, the fighting would stop. That is the start when you think, well, this ceasefire is really working now. Now, remember, if there is a ceasefire, ceasefires are often broken. It often takes several ceasefires before you get one that actually sticks. So first of all, you often get many negotiations for a ceasefire before you get a ceasefire. Then you get many ceasefires before you get one that sticks. And then when you've got one that sticks, then if it lasts and lasts and lasts, that's then when you get your peace treaty. So there'd be a phased withdrawal. So first of all, when we've just got this buffer region in between the two, the war could easily start at any moment. Just Putin just decides, oh, I've had enough of this, I'm going to charge across this border region and try and take a little bit of Ukraine or whatever. Putin's most likely one to try and break a ceasefire. But after a period of time, then what's next? You get probably a week or two, they will have it's all carefully orchestrated. They'd say after, say, 2 weeks of the armies retreating from the border and no serious exchange of fire between the two sides, then the very first Alliance of the Willing members would then join and help set up more air defences in Ukraine, and they would be protected by the air defences, and they would be hundreds or thousands of kilometres from the front line. That would be the next phase probably. And then after that, then you'd start the air patrols. Once it's well established, that might be a month or two down the line. I mean, supposing there's a ceasefire today, there isn't going to be one today, but just to give you an idea how it works. So then you get the air patrols, and that's the point. Once you've got the air patrols with the F-35 fighter jets especially, then you know that Putin is not going to try invading against that. There's no way he's going to try, because it's vastly superior air capability that Ukraine's allies have. They won't give that to Ukraine, but they have it themselves. So you've got the F-35 fighter jets. You'd have the Mirage fighter jets, which Ukraine already has, but many more of them. You've got hundreds of fighter jets can be called on if necessary. And especially if the United States is also providing security guarantees and backing up with its fighter jets too. So at that point, once you get to the point where you've got the air patrols by the Allied fighter jet, the Alliance of the Willing fighter jets, I think at that point you can be pretty certain this is now stuck. And then you would also, once you've got the air patrols, probably come first, and then you get the sea patrols. They'd be protected from the air, you see, by the air patrols. Then you have the sea patrols in the Baltic Sea, and those would protect Ukrainian shipping. Then if we get to that point, then we can be pretty sure that there's a ceasefire, and it's a permanent ceasefire, and there's no way that Putin's going to invade again. So that is how that would work. And it's very, very safe for the Allies, because they know that Putin's not going to invade once all these security guarantees are in place. Oh, that's just a very rough sketch of that, and it just happens step by step and slowly. So then, and then I've already talked in a separate. So that's it. That's my video. I could easily go on and on and make this very long. I might do a third video. I'll see, but I'll upload this one because it just to keep it to one topic at a time. So that is why they need security guarantees. That's how they would provide security guarantees, and that's how security guarantees can be very safe. Please check the video description, and then please do not assume that there is going to be a ceasefire right away, or even this week, or even this month. But there's very definite signals that clearly both sides do want a ceasefire. I think that's becoming more and more clear. And then there might be many failed ceasefire negotiations, but we've started the process that eventually leads to a ceasefire. Almost certainly will eventually lead to a ceasefire. It looks like it. It seems that Putin cares very much about the effect of the oil sales on the finances of the Russian government, and that Trump must have a very strong lever there. And Trump will sense that he has got very strong leverage over Putin, financial leverage, not military. And so I think that is why this is happening. But we can't count on anything yet. So please don't count on anything. Expect it to be a slow process, but it does look promising. So far, I will be following this, and I'll upload. I'll do an update later, another video once we find out more what actually happens. We won't know until the. Just end with just when we will know if it hasn't already got the answer by the time you watch this video. Then you've got 8 o'clock British summertime, so that's another 3 hours from now, and it'd be well after that. It'd be hours after that. It'll probably be in the early hours of the morning if it goes well. Then it would likely last for several hours after that, and before you've actually got something that they will be exchanging with the press. And unless it goes either extremely well, then it might finish quickly, or it doesn't work at all, then you might learn quickly. But if it goes well and there's a lot of things to be sorted out, then probably be several hours after that. We'll just see. Anyway, I'll keep on top of what's going on, and I'll do another blog post or whatever, depending on what happens at that point. So, upload this now.